And what you're doing every time you go into your suffering is you're abandoning your pain. You're abandoning this teacher. You're abandoning this best friend who has come here to show you. So come back to attending. And when I came back to attending, I'm holding space with an open heart, with compassion, and I am actually allowing my heart to break completely. And that is freaking painful.
Yeah.
But it's movement. Practice falling apart. Let yourself fall apart
Yeah.
completely. Have your heart break completely for yourself, for every part of you, for the whole world. Have it all. Have it all. That's how we can learn to let go.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. I'm Shannon, and in this episode, I am truly honored and grateful to be speaking with an incredible, multifaceted psychedelic guide, somatic counselor, animist healer, microdosing coach, and ceremonialist. She's also the creator of The Essential Revolution, a spiritual path to conscious living, accepting students who are truly called to life-changing pilgrimages, a powerful catalyst that initiates them into the process of inner revolution, leading to outer revolution. Originally from sun-drenched shores of Australia's Gold Coast, I am so grateful to be speaking to you today, Angela PRIDER. Welcome to Power Perspectives.
Oh, hi, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be here and to have a chat with you. We've talked about this for a while, so I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. And I mean, I'm so excited for your time. You're a very busy lady, and I don't think we even scraped the whole sides of what you actually do in your bio. So there's so much to you, and I love that. But before we get into kind of your path, I'd love to share, your handle, your lifestyle is Sacred Life Animism. And can you share what animism means to you and why you've moved away from using shaman and shamanism?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I should really say is I really, really steer away from using the word shaman, because shaman is an honorific term, and it comes from the Tungus tribe, or the Tungus people in Siberia. And I just think that there are so many cultures around the world where the practices are so-called shamanic. That's really a term that came around through white anthropology, trying to find a term that describes these people who walk between both worlds and who do, soul work and spiritual healing. But to be a shaman, there is many, many layers to that. So I'm just always very careful, because people say, "Oh, you're my shaman." I'm like, "I am not a shaman." But yeah, and so I think, when I think about, I think part of me being careful about using the word shamanism, and definitely not using the word shaman, is first of all to just open us all up to the diversity of many of the healers and many of the traditions around the world. And it also helped me to really connect in with my own ancestral roots around, spiritual healing in general. So, um, yeah, and then animism, if you think of the word like animation, right? It's about bringing things to life. In animism, we're really looking at what I would call love or life, this drop of the great mystery that is in everything, and that we are all energy and we are all connected. And I know these terms are much more mainstream now, so it's easy for them to get diluted, but we really are. And so animism is terrific because it's a spiritual practice, a spiritual path, a spiritual way of living, where we have reverence for life because everything is alive and everything is connected to everything else. So yeah, I hope that makes it
Yes.
clear. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And I like that. I think you'd shared that it's so specific to a certain people, indigenous people, the word shaman, that's theirs. And so taking it away from it is, debilitating part of their culture. So I will
Exactly.
now stop. I didn't really know that until today. So I'm so grateful that I'm already learning so much from you. Um,
Yeah, for sure. If you look into, in lots of Central South America, so curandero, like
mhm,
in the work of my ancestry in Ireland, a healer, a woman healer there, or a woman of spiritual knowledge would be called a banfasa, right? So there are different words in different cultures, and I think that we don't need to appropriate more from other cultures that have worked so hard to like keep their practices alive and their religions alive.
Yes, beautiful. And I love that. And I think, I mean, in sharing your story and sharing your path, you can already feel just in your presence when someone is more highly aligned or attuned, people can sense that we're all energy and you have that energy. And I think just listening to people describe you being in ceremony is like, not Angela, your angel, walking around and just kind of knowing what to do and how to handle everything. But obviously you didn't start there. So with your path and, you had a road to recovery and through trauma, we often find our higher calling. So if you don't mind sharing, can you talk us through a few of the life-changing aspects of your journey and how you found yourself to the path of healer and guide?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it definitely wasn't a career path, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, when I really think about it, when I really sort of drop in deeply to my own story, yeah, I did grow up with a very disrupted childhood and adolescence. There was, a lot of trauma in my life. And at the same time as that, running right alongside that was the fact that I was like a highly sensitive child. And I think for many people who have been through trauma, especially if their home lives are extremely dysregulated, they might find that when they're in nature, they can get this co-regulation happening with the natural world. So I was very, very connected to the natural world. And I grew up in Australia, so I really didn't spend very much time inside at all. Like,
Mhm.
my mother would move our beds out, like these, camping beds and the dining room table. And we just pretty much lived outside for the majority of the year. So for me, this whole like North American indoor lifestyle is a little bit challenging. Yeah, so I was this very sensitive child. I definitely, now I can look back and see that if I was in the right culture with the right mentors, that they would have supported me with the gifts that I had then. But by the time I hit my adolescence, there was more trauma, and then I just started to medicate and numb, and that really got out of control, with alcohol. And I was just trying to hold it all together. I was just having a mainstream job, um, drinking hard and partying hard, and I just couldn't stop, basically. And and then I went into therapy at a very young age, and I got sober really young. And um, I guess this sort of, one turning point for me, a few things happened. First of all, like a bunch of women friends and I, we created this, this women's circle. It was kind of nothing curated or like there was nothing curated in it at all. It was just like we get together and we cry and we read Women Who Run with the Wolves and we like, talk about the goddess. And like we're just trying to do these things full on grassroots. But that was really big, 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 big healing platform for me for a number of years. And then around that same time, I was in a Jungian trauma therapy group, and we would do these guided visualizations. And pretty much at the first night that we were at this group, and there was this guided visualization, and I just went into an altered state very, very easily. I was just a couple of months sober, and I don't know what the facilitator was doing, but I remember it's still clear as day to me now. I was walking down this path on the sand to a beach. It was windy. I arrived there and there were a bunch of people standing there, and there was a fire, and they just like welcomed me. And I see I'm even getting emotional now. It's like all these years later. They just welcomed me and pulled me in and told me that, they were my people, like my ancestors, and that they had me and that they loved me and then I needed to go back there. And then they put me in the fire and I completely burned. And then I got out as a skeleton, and then they kind of put me back together. And then by this time, I guess the facilitator was saying, okay, just coming back. Right. And I had not gone anywhere where anybody else had gone, and I was too embarrassed to tell anybody about this. And I did talk about it with a therapist afterward. I stayed behind and I'm like, this thing happened. She said, you need to really listen to that. That's profound. And then I've very quickly discovered that I could just like put on some music or just, go into a meditation and go back down to that path and meet them, and also meet Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And, I had the gift of desperation, right? I was just trying to stay sober, and I would just ask them what should I be doing with my life? Or what am I supposed to do today to stay sober? And I did this every day. And then I would have these healings, and soul parts would come back to me, and I would meet ancestors. Like, it was just all going on. And I had one girlfriend that I talked to about it. Like, there is no way I was telling anybody else, because it was just too weird. And I think it was about 10 years later that I heard this word shamanism. And I was like, oh my God, I've been like shamanic journeying and having shamanic dismemberment and soul retrieval and energy extraction. And it had been going on for like a long time. So yeah, that was a big turning point for me. Um, and I guess from there, that was a massive turning point. By this point, like years later, I went back to school and I became a counselor. And then about 9 years into this sort of practice that I had been using to help me stay sober and help me get a life and help me make my life decisions, and all of this soul healing and spiritual healing and healing with my family and like all of this stuff, then that's when I heard this term shamanism, and I went to this workshop down in the States. And I remember standing in that circle, and the facilitator was rattling and whistling, and I literally kind of wept the whole weekend. And I was already working with animal guides, but I just started to put some form and protocol and containment to this thing that I had been doing. And then, just time went on. From there, I started to weave in a little bit of this journeying into my counseling practice. And then probably about 10 years later, I had this series of dreams where this old woman was coming to me. And then, so I journey a lot with my dreams. So I do a lot of, intentional dreaming, and then I deepen that through doing journeying. And, and she just let me know that she was, an ancestor, and that basically I had to go to Ireland. And that turned into these 5 like ancestral pilgrimages to Ireland, and this deep dive into learning all about these old Celtic ways of healing. And then about 3 years into that, I had another big turning point where I came to meet the plant spirit medicines. And that, so I kind of been on this sort of shamanic or animist path for probably about 15 years before I came into the world of psychedelics. And I'm really grateful for that. That really served me well. Yeah.
I love how things just unravel with you'd have no idea how to put the dots together looking forward, but looking back, it's like, okay, I guess this is the jump we're taking. I almost cried already. We've been talking for like 10, 15 minutes, but discussing your ancestral roots. And I mean, you're a pile of bones while everyone's finishing up their journey. When you were speaking or communicating, connecting with your ancestors, did they have a message for you like this is going to be ongoing, this is your purpose, or did you just kind of feel like there was some healing for you, or you were fitting in, this is my family, this is where my bloodline comes from? How did that really feel?
Yeah. I think for me back then, I was in a desperate way. I was like really like my soul, my spirit was just kind of broken. I'd grown up, in Catholicism and Catholic school, and I was so felt so deeply spiritually yearning, but religion really confused me a lot. So when I started to do this practice, and when I would do this journeying, and especially because like Jesus was one of my guides and Mary Magdalene was one of my guides, like I just kind of I was just at that time in my life, I didn't see that this was my purpose. It was just about I needed to heal, and this was my spiritual practice, and this was my spiritual path, right? And I don't know. I mean, it's only really been maybe in the last, I don't know, like 5 years that I'm like, oh, like I've had through my own journey work, I've had these very clear messages that, like even just as recently as 6 months ago, I was in a breathwork meditation to my higher self, and she appeared as Isis and then transformed into another goddess and another goddess and another goddess. And she just said to me, like, you have been a healer in hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes. And this is the form that you've taken this time. And you, that's all it is, and I've had some other I had another extremely profound experience with one of my teachers where we did ceremony together, and I was shown like an experience from when I was 4 years old, that brought me to Canada and brought me to this path, and that I knew at 4 that on a soul level that this would be my path. But it's only really all these decades later that I'm like, oh, right. you know, I get really hesitant about attaching to this is my path, this is my purpose, especially in our day and age. But I just am here going like, as long as I'm here and I'm being of service, and this is how spirit wants me to show up in the world, that I've been told by spirit, you take care of your health and you take care of the time because I'm embodied. So, right? Because spirit would have me working 24/7. So you have to have boundaries. So it's like, Angela,
Boundaries.
yeah, you take care of your physical health and you take care of the time, and we will take care of everything else. And your job is to listen and follow. And that's just the best thing for me to do. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm getting goosebumps every like 2 or 3 seconds. So it just to me that means a resonance of understanding exactly what you're saying. For just I get what you're where you're feeling. What I really wanted to ask you about is also, I mean, you're in this kind of world that you're in, it's constant transformation and constant adaptation and constant seeing the other perspective and constantly coming back to shift and evolve your perspective. And probably one of the biggest things and hardest things, I haven't experienced it myself, but is motherhood. And I wondered how, becoming a mother has shifted or evolved or challenged or all of it, all of the good stuff and all the not so good stuff too. How has becoming a mother evolved your healing journey and your ability to help others?
Oh, that is such a beautiful, oh gosh, it's going right to my little jelly heart in here when I think about like my daughter. Well, first of all, like I was on like the infertility, terrible word, train, right? And so it was through journeying that I did a lot of work with my own body and with previous traumas that I had to do a lot of clearing before I actually got pregnant. And I'm quite comfortable in sharing this, but I had a very traumatic experience when I was 15 that led me to having an abortion. And because I was Catholic, I carried
Yeah.
around this terrible guilt around that until, I was trying to get pregnant. I'm like, what is going on here? And then one day I was hiking in the woods, and I was standing on this beautiful bridge, and the river was running underneath the bridge. And I just said this prayer, and I turned around, I faced upriver, and I asked the river to just cleanse any shame or guilt I had and anything that I was holding on to about that abortion, which was like decades earlier.
Mm.
And then, like, Mother Mary just came to me, and she just said to me, like, ah, it's an emotional day. She just said to me, like, being a woman means that it's your birthright to mother a child if you choose. It's your birthright. It's not about that you're a good enough woman to do that. And you really need to own that. And I had been just like holding like this little baby because I didn't know how to, like, where that baby was going, and my own guilt and everything. And then I just gave her that little baby. And it was so powerful. And it was pretty shortly after that that I got pregnant again. And then I had a miscarriage. And
Oh.
then I had to go through that, like, okay, this piece. And then a month after that, I got pregnant with my daughter. And by that point, I was like, oh, well, fingers crossed, we're just don't attach. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens. But all the way during my pregnancy, you know, when I felt sort of a little bit confident enough that, you know, this wasn't going to miscarry, I would journey and I would meet her and I would talk to her. And having my birth at home was like a massive initiation because you are standing at those gates. You're at the gates, the life death gates, right? You're at the gates of the womb tomb, like it's all going on. And it was such an incredibly empowering experience because I really felt like I advocated for myself and that I was really, it was just such a powerful, powerful experience. I had this beautiful, my friend who's a Métis Cree medicine woman was there and was praying. And yeah, and then I think through my life, a lot of my work has been like consulting with spirit about how to parent in a very as consciously as possible, which takes a lot of work. My daughter was around like my animist work. And then when she became a teenager, it's like I was like the weirdest. Like she was just like by the way, I'm bringing my friends over for a sleepover tonight. And if you can just like get rid of all your weird stuff, please. And I was just like, sure, not a problem, right? Her job is to like, you know, separate from how she sees herself. Like she needed to be different. And so I would just pack up drums and pack up all, put it all away and, you know, all this kind of thing. And then many, many years later, I was in the ceremony with her and afterwards, and some of her friends, I did a ceremony when she
Wow.
turned 19 with her and some of her friends. And she was, I'm sure she would be fine if I shared this, but she had some tears and she said, I can't believe it. I thought that I was growing up with the weird mom, but I was really growing up with the cool mom.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I'd love if my mom had drums and crystals everywhere, and
Yeah.
but that was the
Yeah.
experience, right? She had to have. Doesn't matter what it was going to be. There was always going to be a resistance to rebel and then come back. I
It
think that's
was. And,
teenage
you
life.
know, I think too, when she was growing up, like she went through her own journey because, you know, around about COVID, all this world kind of exploded for kids. She's 20 now. For kids in that age group, everyone was all about crystals and blah, 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 blah. And she had her own journey around like kind of like being the weird one at school. Like, well, what is animism, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people are, you know, on Snapchat, like saying, how do I cleanse my crystals? So she had to find her own way with that, but she's very grounded,
Mhm.
you know, around spirituality. She's very grounded around it. So yeah.
Well, she's got amazing roots. Um, wow. And I thank you so much for sharing before about, with birth and miscarriages and abortion and women just it's important to know that you don't need to necessarily have years and years of therapy. You can talk to spirit yourself. I love that you said consult spirit. I call it channeling. I was going to ask you a bit more about how you channel, but you're consulting spirit. You have this divine connection at your fingertips, so the answers are within. How do you best feel that we can overcome these tumultuous times that the planet is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing, and it's part of, you know, why I teach what I teach and hold the spaces that I hold is we really need to become more spiritually resilient. We really do. And I think part of it is, I think that for many of us, maybe all of us in a way, um, we're all kind of recovering in a sense from organized religion because once you get told
Big
that
time.
you know you have to segment off your spiritual life and it's over here and it's on Sunday and this is when it happens and this is how you do it, all of these kinds of things, you know, our spirit, like our body, you know, is like our mind, is always evolving, it's always changing, it's always growing. And so I think at this time, like, you know, in the world, we have this meta crisis happening. You know, there is this crisis of, you know, of mental health, of meaninglessness. We have a geopolitical crisis. We have, climate crisis. Like, it's all happening, and never really before have we been privy to all of it because of social media, and which has led, I believe, to like a nervous system crisis, right? You cannot take in that much information and stimulation and regulate it and then be able to understand it and make meaning of it, especially if we are not spiritually grounded and spiritually connected. So for me, with especially with some of the deeper programs that I teach, I'm really trying to align what I call sort of the 4 foundational medicines together to deal with some of this, because we're all trying to digest and integrate this, and it's very, very difficult to do. So for me, somatic practice and somatic work and becoming regulated is a huge part of my work. And I believe it's really also tied into our spirituality. And then animism is really, really supports us, and ancestral healing really support us with like geopolitical crisis. Because I really think, when I think about the mass emigration, for example, from Ireland, we have to remember that our ancestors were leaving lands that potentially they had been living on for generations, like 10, 12 generations of families being on the same land. So there's a whole lore that comes from that. There are stories, there's mythology, there's just so much happening on that one piece of land. Now, when you leave that land, and you don't have all of those stories, all of the soul medicines, like the songs, the dances, the poetry, the stories, when you don't have those soul medicines, then you become disconnected from the land. And I think that's really why, the capitalist machine can destroy the earth and not think twice about it, is we're not connected ancestrally. So ancestral healing and animism, connecting us to the land, connecting us to ourselves. And plant spirit medicine is so powerful when it comes to this crisis of meaninglessness that we're having, because it teaches us to look at things from the big picture, and it opens our capacity for compassion, and I think because we're such like mind-centered culture, we're all about the mind, that we're always trying to figure things out. We can't figure these things out. This is not about figuring anything out, right? This is about allowing all that is happening to move through us and being present to what is here and seeing if we can actually hold a space of compassion for it all, rather than trying to figure it out, because that's just the suffering.
Oh, great reminder. Great reminder. I had a question for you that is, what is the purpose of suffering, and why do we need it as part of our human experience? And I think you just kind of nailed it. Can you describe, I mean, from a perspective of a healer, where you do work and walk between 2 worlds? Most people will never experience that. But can you describe what it feels like to be holding space for people that are transforming before your eyes? And it could look like ecstasy, and it could look like absolute terror, and it could look like laughter, and it could look like yawning, and it could look like everything under the sun. But what does it feel like for the facilitator? And I don't even feel like that's a great enough word for what you're doing, but what does it feel like for you, for the animist, holding the space, feeling the transition, but you're holding it? What's that like?
Yeah, well, for me, I just look at it like, who is holding me as I'm holding the space? That is the key piece, And this is where I am so grateful and humbled by the traditions and the lineages that I walk with, because that is holding me. And some of those traditions, when I think about, Indigenous teachers here and in Peru and in Ireland, and, the main, big teachers that I call them big teachers. They are big teachers, but they're like very humble people, right?
Yeah.
When I think about my teacher in Peru, he's like mostly a farmer, but he's such a powerful healer. But yeah, so the piece for me is like, who is holding me? And I did these beautiful trainings with Clarissa Piccola Estes, who's just like, oh my God, that woman is a goddess. And she would always say, in one of her prayers, like, Spirit, help me to be small enough and clean enough to move through the door. And I always say, help me to be small enough and clean enough to step through the tiny door into the infinite universe. So really, what's so tricky about psychedelics is that they are non-specific amplifiers. So they're going to amplify anything. That's why people come to 3 ceremonies, and now I'm going to be a facilitator, because there's a little hidden part in their shadow that they want to do that they want to, their ego wants to attach to a role. And the psychedelics amplify that and lead us to really believing that this is what we're meant to be doing, right? But in my own experience, I was quite nervous about the psychedelic world. Like I was like, this is, well,
Yeah.
holy Jesus, when I'm in the space, that's what I think. That's why I'm always acknowledging my teachers and honoring those lineages and calling them in and being in right relationship with the land when we're in ceremony, because we might be in a yurt, we might be in a dome, but there are a circle of trees that are really, we're in their circle,
Yeah.
So I think that this is a key piece for me, is it's really about who is holding me, and my job is to be small enough and clean enough, and my intention is always to listen. That's my work, is I have to listen to the medicine and listen to how it's showing up, and listen to my own body, listen to my spiritual teachers that I've been working with for a long, long time. And then that's just the work. And the rest of it is kind of a bit of a dance, to be honest. It's about contacting that 6-year-old me that, would dance and sing and just be in that really lyrical energy. I think too that something important that I've really been sitting with for a while, because I have sat with a number of facilitators in the same medicine. For example, Wachuma, I've sat in Peru, I've sat here, I've sat, with different people. And I guess I really learned that like the medicine is really about the relationship between the guide and the medicine. The medicine is really the space between them,
Okay.
right? It's like if you go to watch a band, the medicine is really between the band and the audience. It's that relationship kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you can go and sit with a facilitator in the same medicine, the same, psychedelic, and it is a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's about that.
So you're still kind of a channel for the medicine to speak. And I wonder, do you, you're in a group of 10, of 12, let's say, and then you also do one-on-one facilitation. But let's say if one person needs something, do you get a message from the medicine, or do you just feel intuitively a vibration? How does that work?
Yeah, I get a message, go to that person.
Cool.
And
And then,
it always happens in a divine order. And I spend a lot of time going over protocol before a deep dive ceremony, a long time, because I always say to people, I know it feels like I'm talking forever and it sounds boring. But what we're really doing is we're weaving an energetic container. So the deeper and cleaner the protocol, the deeper we can all go. And part of, the protocol that I talk about with people is I always say, like, just be open to piggybacking the healing, right? So, when you're in the medicine, everybody is connected. So sometimes what can come up for people is like, oh, Angela's over there and they're working with that person and she's never going to get to me. And I always say, like, we're connected.
yeah.
So tap in and tune in, and you can really experience whatever that person is having over there. You can experience that yourself.
I'm like having these flashbacks to times when I'm in an ayahuasca ceremony, but we're with strangers. And, I really think moving forward, I would be in a group of people that I know and that I'm very connected to, or that you've at least had it, specific introduction and time spent. So I love that you take time to make the basket. That's that to weave the container. That's so important. And that's the most important thing. Know what to expect, knowing that you have an intention. But yeah, I felt people's stuff across the circle and just sending stuff. I've had, I won't say sex, but like
Yeah.
sexual energy exchange, which is the highest, climactic thing with a group of strangers, and they didn't know, but you are definitely connected, and you know that in those spaces. You've worked with so much ceremonies in ayahuasca with shuma, psilocybin. Do you feel a calling more now to one as more than another, or has there been an evolution, or do you participate in all three more? How does that work for
Yeah.
you these days?
I think that like I really kind of did what I would say was kind of like my apprenticeship with mostly with ayahuasca for about 5 years.
Wow.
And then I was sitting, fairly regularly with Wachuma with some of my teachers. But it was really in about 2016, 2017, when I was in Ireland, that we were on the last stop of this pilgrimage that I was on, and we were at a very particular cairn, this incredible 5,000-year-old cairn that is connected to one of my main spiritual guide.
Wow.
And um, and we got down to the bottom of the mountain, and I was the last person to leave, and I just wanted to say thank you to the grandmother. I was like, thank you so much. And she said to me, yes, and by the way, you really need to be working with mushrooms. Like, that's your ancestral medicine, and like that's what you really should be doing. And I was like, oh God, like
More work to do.
I was like, no, more responsibility. Um, but I was like, okay, all right, I'll just put a pin in that. And, I came home and I kind of, ambled along and rumbled along. And I had some experiences with ayahuasca where it was looking like that relationship was going to be changing. Mostly because I think for me and my adrenal system, I don't know that ayahuasca was like ideal to be doing as often as I was doing it, sitting with. Um, anyway, I came home and I spoke to my teachers about making the shift to psilocybin. And then the moment that I shifted to psilocybin, it's like everything that I had been teaching around sort of, spirituality from the Western Isles or the Celtic world, everything went click.
I was waiting
And
for
I was
you.
right. And I was like, oh my God, I've just been training, So now primarily I work with psilocybin, and because psilocybin, was once known in the old Irish way as the little white horses,
Oh.
right? So if you think about unicorns, it's like,
Mhm.
right? So the little white horses, they take you to the other realms so that you can learn things. And I think now for me, what I really understood, especially when I think about um, the sacred feminine in the old Irish way is very much about like the hag and the maiden, like the dark and the light. And, you know, that hag energy, the grandmother is like who I have been working with for all of these years. And then, of course, she was like, well, this all makes sense because psilocybin, it grows in the woods, or it grows in shit, right? And and it really helps us to decompose our shadow, right? And so I've learned a lot from that. I've learned a lot about like this is really about learning how to let go and to become comfortable with death and to allow the medicine to decompose that heavy energy that we're carrying around so that it can be transformed into wisdom.
So beautifully said. I was trying to explain to my mother yesterday, visiting family in Canada, what psilocybin is, and that I'm not doing drugs and going loony. And I just started explaining, like, do you know what fungus does? And if it doesn't decompose, we've got starting today. If mushrooms didn't decompose everything, fungus didn't decompose it, you're one generation, one cycle, and then you can't deal with life anymore. And it
That's
doesn't
right.
just decompose it; it transforms it, transmutes it into the next life, and that is a wisdom and intelligence that we can't fathom, but we get to be in its presence. And I know we both kind of met in the psilocybin space, but let's talk about microdosing for a minute. And I love how you work with microdosing, but you also work with macrodosing. And I love that you're not trying to tell everyone, okay, this is what you do here and this is what you do here. It's every body is different and every soul and spirit needs its own path. So what's going to work for her isn't going to work for him. And don't try to compare yourself to this or that. For you, what are your favorite benefits of microdosing, and how might you advise someone that's just trying to, like, a parent that doesn't really understand, how do you connect them with the absolute brilliance that is these plant medicines?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I I really talk about it when I'm working with people one-on-one, taking them through like a microdosing cycle, for example. Like I'm all about conscious microdosing. So my goal is to help people develop a relationship with psilocybin. If they're microdosing psilocybin, I want them to develop a relationship with the plant spirit. That's that's my key. So I really think because psilocybin and the mycelium network really is about helping us to connect, that when we're microdosing, we're connecting to those parts of us that are potentially in the shadow. So if we are dealing with depression, what the psilocybin is bringing to us is like, oh, we're going to like amplify your your light because that's what you need right now. Um, and so I think that for me, microdosing is just on the continuum to macrodosing. Like there's not really, I know that in like kind of mainstream microdosing, it's become this like supplement, but I
Mhm.
really like to look at microdosing as a spiritual supplement. It's a supplement to your spiritual life. So I think that the key is to stay conscious about it and to know that we're connecting with an intelligence here. It's not just popping a freaking pill, like, and we're so
Yeah.
conditioned, we're so like, oh, give this a try. And, I'm not opposed to that, but I really, if that works for you, that's fine. But I really am a believer in having reverence, and developing a relationship. And I saw your reel today on Lion's Mane, and I was just like, I was, in the kitchen and I took my lion's mane, off the shelf, and I just took a moment to connect in. It's not lion's mane isn't psychedelic, but I just took this moment to have some reverence and be like, oh yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
When you first find out that a mushroom can help your neurons recreate themselves, like, what? And why is this hidden from us? And then we go down the whole journey of you know what how
Yeah.
the world runs, but it's not all the shadow. And
Hmm.
I love that you use the word reverence, because when you were describing your experience with your lineages, and just giving that respect, like that, I think is a doorway. And I
Yeah.
also love that you said, let me be small enough to enter into the infinite world, infinite universe. Um, that with the mushrooms, it just feels so like a mycelial network, just continuously connecting, small, tiny spore, changing everything, just catching the wind and going in its own direction. Really, really love that. And I'd
I
love
have
to
to tell
ask,
you, I have to tell you a funny story.
oh, I love
So,
funny stories.
yeah, so one day I think it was microdosing, and I was doing a little journey, and I was doing this journey into this pyramid, and I went in there, and there were two like aliens standing there, but they're really just the fairy. They're really just like the medicine. And I said to them, oh, like, oh, you're here. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're the spores. There was a tall one and a short one.
Oh,
We're the spores. And I was like, oh, really? And they said, yeah, you have a relationship with us. We're always with you. You don't even need to microdose. We're always with you all the time. And yeah, this is who we are. We're the spores. And then the little ones. But sometimes we call ourselves the s'mores because we give more and more and more.
ah, I love
So I
that.
call them the s'mores now.
Oh my God, I love that. And I'm not at the level where they've talked to me like that, but they have. And in microdosing, but literally I've had a conversation where I'm acknowledged, and it's like, welcome to class, because I'm a desperate learner. I always want to learn more, expand, evolve consciousness. And the mushrooms are patient teachers. Like, if you come and with reverence and you understand that we have something to share and we share it with love, and just all we need from you is your openness. That's it. We just need your openness, then we will help you. And I have
Yeah.
felt so many times in microdosing, a, like a trigger about to, like a piano note or keystroke about to happen that is so programmed in, but the mushroom was just like, nah, like, just we won't complete that. We're so used to doing that cycle, but it's not actually efficient for you anymore. And you've made the conscious decision that you want to change. We're just a gentle tap off of the norm. And
Exactly.
gentle tap is what can change everything. That's the tiny little bit that makes the avalanche happen. And it does it so subtly and so elegantly and so beautiful. I'm pointing over here because I have all my mindful
Yeah,
stuff and
right.
just, oh, my
Yeah.
mindfulness. But like for you, I really wanted to ask you about this because they help us let go of programs and surrender, which is such a big, huge thing. And people know, okay, I have to let go and surrender, but how? How do I stop this program that I've been, you know, repeating for 10, 20, 30 years, 5 years, whatever, and now I'm just supposed to stop it because I know it's not good for me. How do I
Yeah.
let go? How do I actually let go?
I think that we have to develop the willingness to face, or no, to feel our pain.
Mm.
I really think that we have to develop, courage and willingness to face our pain. And, I was just in ceremony a while ago, and to allow our heart to break completely. And if we are not willing to do that, then it is going to be uncomfortable. And that is just how it is. And, it's like I always say, we are a death denying culture. Like, we are an accumulating, consumerist culture. We're all about give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, own it, like, oh, like this is what we do. We take, 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 take. And we don't know actually how, our nervous system doesn't even know how to let go. People have a hard time even letting go to sleep at night, or letting go to rest. How the hell are we going to let go with all sorts of other things?
Yeah.
And it is a practice. It's like I say to people when they come to ceremony, keep an eye out, or even if you're microdosing consciously, keep an eye out for the practice that the medicine is bringing you.
Mm.
And the practice will come in like a theme that repeats itself over and over in a ceremony, or a theme that keeps coming up in your life. The medicine will show you how to let go. So, for example, a lot of the work that comes to me and the teachings that come to me from the medicine happen in the integration. That's why I am so hardcore about integration. It's where everything happens. Like, integration is harvest season. Integration is the autumn time of the year, right? It's like where all the fruit is here, right? And so one time I had been in, a ceremony, and the next day, I'd gone through my day, and that night I got into bed and I was having a reactivation of the medicine. I'm like, oh, it's here. Okay. So I put on some music, I put on a playlist, and I just went back into the journey. And what occurred was a huge teacher for me. I'll try to make this as succinct as I can. But what was coming up was, my pain of abandonment around my father. And that's a big one. And I just asked the medicine to help me. And then one of my spiritual teachers turned up. And I sat up in my bed for 2.5 hours practicing being the attendant to my pain, exactly like I would practice being the attendant to my best friend or my beloved who was really sick and dying. And so I would have, stuff sort of coming up about this, memories of my early childhood and my pain. And like, it was huge, and like just crying. I was just sitting there crying. And every time my mind wanted to go and psychologize it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. We psychologize that. It was like, oh, well, this is a childhood pattern. Oh, well, this must be, no wonder I've got these attachment issues. Or, oh, no wonder I have these relationship like all of the stuff that we are inundated with. every time I went to go there, the medicine would say to me, okay, now you're going into the suffering. And what you're doing every time you go into your suffering is you're abandoning your pain. You're abandoning this teacher. You're abandoning this best friend who has come here to show you. So come back to attending. And when I came back to attending, I'm holding space with an open heart, with compassion, and I am actually allowing my body to, my heart to break completely. And that is freaking painful.
Yeah.
But it's movement. It's movement. And then I would go back up again. Oh, clickety click, click. No, back down. Be the attendant to your pain. And I just had to go through that for the 2.5, 3 hours and keep having my tears and keep having my snot fest and keep having being messy and falling apart. And I often say that to people, like, practice falling apart. Let yourself fall apart
Yeah.
completely. Have your heart break completely for yourself, for every part of you, for the whole world. Have it all. Have it all. That's how we can learn to let go, is by interrupting all of that. And that's work. It's getting out of the head, going back down to the body, in and down, in and down, in and down. It's a practice.
This is the work. This is we speak of shadow work. We speak of, and nobody wants to do that, especially when you're by yourself. You don't have someone poking or prodding or an accountability buddy. And that is true strength. I think only recently in the last few years, 5 years, maybe, I've understood that surrender is not disempowerment. It's actually one of the strongest things that you can do. But the word even just used to feel not strong enough, not good enough, unworthy, associated with all the other things that we're programmed with to not be enoughness. But as you're saying, let your heart break completely. I mean, when you first heard that word from your grandmother's spirit, like, oh, you need to do work with psilocybin, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it's because, like, oh, there's a heartbreak I have to do in there again, and I gotta do it. But you intuitively know, intrinsically know that this is the way. This is the way, and this is the path. And we all know that it is. And the death is only a rebirth. And it sounds so cliche. We can hear it every way, but until you really experience that, I can just fall completely apart and I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere.
I've
haven't
got you.
died.
That's what you say to yourself. Like, fall apart, and because our higher self has us, and there's a big difference between surrender and submission, right? And we have those mixed up in our culture. I mean, the roots of the word surrender, sur, French heart, the softening of the heart. But we have this associated with surrender means I give up. Yes, it is. It is like, I give up. Like, take me. Like, I don't want to be in the freaking suffering. But we also have it associated with like losing. Yeah. And this is part of like patriarchal misogyny programming, right? It's like, but there's a difference between submitting and surrendering. When we submit, it's like we are going to get dragged across the floor and leave our nail marks in the floor as we're getting, okay, all right, I don't really want to. Surrender is like, you're like a flower that's opening. And you're just letting the petals fall away.
I love that. And even when you're talking, I feel like I've gone into flashbacks of different ceremonies of like feeling the fingers on the floor, like, don't take me. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Why did I do this thing? Why did I take the medicine? And then when you just let go, you're hot, you're held. I love Terence McKenna's quote about just like hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering that there's a feather bed was there the whole time.
That's right.
Amazing, Angela. I have like probably 100 more questions for you and probably zero time. I know that you're very busy. Lastly, before I ask you where we can find you, is like, thank you 100%. And I do understand that the power of the medicine doesn't even need to be ingested. It's in the light and the body of you. And that is medicine for me and for everyone that you touch. So thank you for doing the work and being a snotty mess and doing your work, because you help the world be a better place and help other people do their work. So I'm so grateful. But Angela, how can people find you and how can they work with you if that's in their higher calling?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Shannon. It's been such a really great conversation. Yeah, we could just keep chatting forever. Yeah. So definitely my website, angelaprider.com. And when you go onto that homepage, there's a little button there that says like book a connection call. And most Tuesday afternoons, I'm a little bit more like lax in the summertime, but you can, if anything that's on your mind or questions about like plant spirit medicine or animism or your own soul or anything, just go in there and book 15 minutes and we'll have a little chat. And then I'm on Instagram, Angela Prider. I'm on Facebook, Angela Prider. So it's very straightforward where to find me.
Awesome.
And yeah, follow me on Instagram because that's sort of a place where I'm not so great in the summer, but I'm there fairly regularly.
I love that. And I mean, your humility is huge, which is sounds counterintuitive, but I thank you. I don't even have the proper words to just give you the gratitude that you deserve, but thank you for doing your work. It's
Thank you,
really an honor to
Shannon.
chat with you.
Yeah.